Welcome to Conversate, our podcast where we engage in conversation. On this week's episode, I, Aaron, and Kevin are talking about stories and the importance that they play in getting to know who God is and who we are. So, as always, we hope you enjoy this conversation. Woosah. All right. Kevin, it's good to see you today.
Hey, you too, Aaron.
Is that a new shirt?
Nope, it's old. I just don't wear it very often.
It looks new.
Yeah, it's because I don't wear it very often. When I wear stuff too often, then it looks real old.
I know.
Yeah. How about you, man?
No, this is not new. This is also very old. And my wife asked me over the weekend why I still have this shirt. Because it's old. And that's why I'm wearing it today.
Hey, nice.
Not to spite my wife, but to prove a point. It's a good shirt.
That is
Plus,
a good shirt.
look at it. It's like complementary to yours, Kevin.
Yeah, I got a little
purple,
red tone in there.
It almost looks like we planned this.
We never plan anything.
We didn't even plan what we're going to talk about today.
No.
But the Spirit will move amongst us as He does. No, I mean, that's why we know that we're going to talk about your sermon and stuff, but that's why we just call it Conversate, right?
Yeah, just conversation.
Kind of pick up and catch up with one another and see how the Spirit moves that and share experiences.
It's kind of funny too, like thinking about planning a conversation. I don't know if you've ever tried to do that.
Oh, all the time.
I used to do that when I was a kid. When I was like middle school, I got really nervous when I'd call my friends up on the phone, and so I'd have a little index 3x5 card with the things that I wanted to mention. Because as soon as I got on the phone with my friends, I'd just like kind of forget everything like the whole reason I called. You know.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I was kind of a shy guy.
Yeah, we, my wife and I talked about that. We just call it like talking points. You know, like I don't know. Sometimes. We actually went on a date recently, but Ari came along, so he still stole the show. But it's just funny, unfortunately when we have so many kids and stuff, it's hard to just get real conversations with the wife and that kind of stuff. And so, like, I don't remember how it happened, but we like intentionally stopped a conversation, like prior to going on the date. We intentionally stopped a conversation that we were like trying to start in the midst of it. We were like, let's save that for talking points, like
sure, for the date.
Yeah, exactly. So we have something to talk about.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to me. Right now already on this Conversate episode, you and I have both shared stories from our life. Like, we couldn't help it. It's just natural.
Right.
Like everybody does this.
We do.
Yeah, even in this data heavy modern world we live in, like we don't give data about our weekend. You just you tell a story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people, I think some people are natural storytellers for sure. A lot of you listening to this podcast might know my former coworker and good friend of all of us, but Dave Weber, Pastor Dave Weber, and I love Dave. And Dave, if you're listening, I love the way his mind works. Like just, I don't know, like everything. I think everything's a story. It seems. It doesn't hurt that it seems like good stories also happen to him in life.
Right.
Can generate those. But I think some people are just natural storytellers for sure. All of us do it. I think some of us do it maybe a bit more naturally, or maybe more elaborately, or more often. But yeah, whenever we're sharing about, I don't know, experiences or whatever, that's all story.
Yeah.
We're just, I don't know, reporting what happened.
And if I understand, and I don't know a lot about this, but what I recall about kind of like the psychological world or the world of psychology, like even when it comes to our sense of self, like this isn't something we actively do, but we all have this kind of narrative sense of who we are, right? And it helps us understand our place in the world, or what we do, why we get up, what we're gonna do with our life. And sometimes for people who have maybe like a mental breakdown, nervous breakdown, or like kind of a identity crisis, sometimes that happens when something gets thrown into this narrative arc of your life that doesn't seem to fit.
Okay.
So it's like, a lot of traumatic episodes would be in this, right? It was never thought it was going to happen, never planned, it wasn't in the story I thought I was writing for myself. And so now I'm kind of confused. Like, I don't even know who I am after this. And I just think that it's so interesting that we even kind of like, I guess, and again, I don't really know too much about this world of psychology, but I remember learning this at the seminary, kind of about child development and this narrative arc idea of our lives. And I know for myself, like I hesitate to say it was anything as far as like a, I mean, it was a bit of an identity crisis. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it was a nervous breakdown or mental breakdown, but like when I was at the seminary, it was odd for me. Like I had moments where it was kind of like, yeah, like the narrative of my life felt like it was really changing. I didn't really know who I was, what I was doing. Like, I mean, now like looking back, I can see kind of how I got there, and I feel a little bit more like, I don't know, at ease and confident about where my life is. But sometimes I still, even now, I wake up and it's like, I wake up in a house that I own in Chassel with 2 kids, and I'm like, I don't know, do you ever do that? And you're just like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And then, but then that's life though too, right? I mean, I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but I have had those moments for sure. Yeah. I have 4 children and I'm sleep deprived, so a lot of the time it's just like a blur or a fuzz. But for sure, I've had a lot of those conversations, and I think that that your sermon was probably very applicable for a lot of people, especially I don't know, the metaphors abound, but when the carpet or the rug's pulled out from under you, or when I don't know, whatever other metaphor it is, but when everything crumbles, when
falls apart,
everything hits the fan, it's just like we understand this idea of like it's going well, and then all of a sudden it's not, what happens there. And I think what can happen, it can go either way though, where I believe that those moments are great moments to actually grow even deeper in your faith. I was just having a conversation with a young man who's trying to reach some other people with the good news of Jesus, some friends of his that are really just apathetic. They just kind of live life in apathy about everything. It's just sort of like, I don't know, like I don't really know what's true, but I'm doing my thing and I'm happy and healthy and I have my friends and blah, blah, blah. It's just sort of apathetic about faith, apathetic about, just kind of
life, work.
But
everything's kind of a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know. The person I was talking to was like, I don't even know how to like bring the good news of Jesus to somebody that's so apathetic, And in all honesty, I said, yeah, it's actually really hard, it's really hard, and unfortunately, I think sometimes what needs to happen in those people's lives is sometimes for things to kind of fall apart too,
Yeah.
And obviously, we can have conversations where we lead people to a place where they recognize that not everything's good, not everything's great. The world is pretty messed up, right? Even if nothing bad actually happens to them, we can point out the bad that's all around and kind of go, yeah, the world is a shaky foundation to build your life on. But Jesus is a sure and certain foundation to build your life on and to find your identity and purpose and value in.
And that's I think that that idea of how do you live, how do you get by in this world, right? Like given the kind of place that it is, filled with conflict and difficulty and challenge and frustration and grief, And so I mentioned a podcast I was listening to about meaning. I mentioned that in the sermon, and one of the pieces of that podcast talked a little bit about the difference kind of between someone who like doesn't have any religion or any faith, right, and a Christian. And he was saying one of the differences, the speaker on this podcast was saying one of the differences that as a Christian, you want to think more, right? You want to think more because it's our thinking about the reality, the truths that we know that actually give us purpose and hope in life, right? So it's like, I'm in this conflict moment and things are falling apart, and so what I need to do, I don't need to be apathetic and not forget. I need to remember that, okay, I'm not alone in this, right? There's a God who created me. He is seeing way more than I'm seeing, and he actually has a purpose for my life, and he's going to keep connecting me to that purpose, right? He has given his life for me. He loves me. Okay. So like this is bad. Like whatever I'm in, it's not going well, but I'm not abandoned. I'm okay. I can push on, right? But if you're someone who doesn't have a faith as your foundation in this world, and this is something that the speaker was talking, like even like people who are I don't know, philosophers and writers and deep thinkers on kind of these issues, they will tell you can't think too much about it, because if your kind of view is the world is an accident, you're an accident of an evolutionary cycle, right? You have this life now, but you'll be dead and gone, and no one will ever remember you. It's really hard to live. It's really hard. It's really hard to have any care about the world. It's really hard to have care about yourself. You kind of have to be apathetic.
Right.
And the advice even from these guys who kind of like that is their belief about the world and the way it is. That's what they'll recommend. Like, don't think about it too much, because if you do, you'll drive yourself mad. You'll be depressed.
Interesting.
And so like as Christians, we actually want to think more. Right? We want to use, I guess, the gift of our ration that God has given us to think about these truths that we live in, instead of basically just trying to escape or not think or numb out. There's always ways that we kind of cope with life. Right? So.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we have a bigger story. I guess it's part of that whole bit, right? Like.
Yeah, and I think that just thinking back to your sermon too. You asked, you asked people this question. What's your story? What's your story? And I love asking people that question. I love getting to know new people, and just ask questions like, I don't know if I probably said that to people, like, tell me your story, whatever, and then ask further questions. I just love asking questions to people and flushing it out and stuff. It's just very intriguing to me. I'm genuinely interested to hear the stories of people's lives. It's just fascinating, to hear those stories, to hear experiences, and to hear, especially when people tie their faith into that story and God's activity and presence throughout. It's just fascinating to watch what God has and is doing in the lives of people and in the world and stuff. It's just it's remarkable, So it's kind of a humbling thing as a pastor to be involved in the lives of people who are, I think, oftentimes willing to share those stories and experiences and stuff. And so I truly love, getting to know your stories, and those, and I think Kevin does too, just sitting and hearing that, because I don't know, hearing other people's stories and those experiences, especially of God's activity, I think are really moving for us, more so I think than even just like explaining or studying the Bible and the theological doctrines or whatever.
Right.
So, because there's something written, I don't know, there's something written into us how this is such human nature to live life in story, and to have those stories they do something different to us emotionally and whatever. So I don't know if you've had it happen yet, but in preaching, oftentimes we tell stories to further elaborate a point, or to just to connect the abstract into something tangible. And I don't, listeners, I'd be curious what you think about this, but oftentimes when I've heard sermons or whatever, and there was a powerful story or whatever, sometimes I remember the story, but I don't remember what the point was.
Sure.
So I think that's I remember that in preaching classes though too. Like I remember them saying like, somehow, you need, the gospel tie-in needs to actually be tied into that story.
Sure.
Because if your image or your story that you're telling to prove the point, the analogy, if that's so strong, people won't remember actually what the point is. So to get those things definitely tied together is important. But I think that happens. We hear stories, and then we're like, I don't remember what the point was, but that was a really Really interesting story.
Yeah.
People say it to me all the time about my jokes. I'm just kidding.
No.
Nobody
I
appreciates.
remember some of your jokes. I appreciate them.
Do you?
Yeah.
Thanks,
I do.
Kevin.
I do. I'm trying to think. There was one. It really did make me laugh. I can't remember.
Was it on Easter?
Yeah, I think it was.
Well, the Easter one,
that was the funeral guy. Yeah. And then the cremation, right?
Yeah.
Remains to be seen.
Yeah. See, I tied that one. I tied the punchline in though. You are remains to be seen.
That's right.
You know? So that was the close.
Yeah. But yeah, no. I think stories are powerful, and it's even interesting thinking like, we talk about human nature, like stories are so ingrained in human, but it seems like story is also just ingrained in who God is. And I kind of appreciate that in terms of the book, we've been going through, or last year, the story, right? Like we call it the Bible most of the time, which is fine, collection of books, but like this is how God has chosen to reveal who he is to us, right? He didn't just give us a list of, here are my attributes, here are my qualities, here's the things you got to believe if you want to be saved. No, he didn't do it that way.
Right.
He literally told a story, or lived a story.
And that's primarily what the Bible is.
Yeah.
Primarily. There's, again, if you don't know this, the Bible is broken up into different kinds of literary genres, right? So the vast majority of it is narrative. It's storytelling, but then there are psalms, right, which are songs. There's poetry. There are genealogies. there are lists of rules, right? All these things exist, but all of that is actually wrapped together, though, in the fact that it's telling this overarching story of God being God, God creating, God working with this fallen creation to redeem them, to buy them back, to save them from their sins, culminating in Jesus and eventually Christ's return and the restoration of what went wrong in creation, right? I mean, so I think I hope for those of you who have been journeying with us through the story that at least one of my hopes is that you can see that narrative arc and flow of the Bible, because I think this is one of the things that a lot of us struggle with the Bible. A lot of Christian people are like, I know the Bible's important. I want to read the Bible. I don't know how, and anytime I open it up, I struggle to fit the pieces together, and a lot of it doesn't make sense, and I'm just like, So again, the reason that we've been going through this, the book, the story, is so you can get the overarching umbrella story, so that when you go back to your Bible, you can look at it and say, oh, I see where that fits. I understand where God's people are living, while these things are being written, what's happening in the world. Because I mean, honestly, I probably didn't have that good of an understanding of the Bible like that, probably until I went to the seminary.
Yeah, same.
I don't know, so, and sorry, Dad, if you're listening, or Mom, it's not your fault, but I mean, I grew up in a Christian household. I went to church all the time, read I knew Bible stories and all that stuff. I went to a Christian college where I was studying to be a pastor. Somehow I just still didn't get it, but I don't know if it was emphasized to us at the seminary or finally just studying it enough, it finally started clicking, when I was just reading it a lot, that it was like, okay, there's movement, and there's this people, and they're moving, and stuff's happening, and God is God, and they're falling, and he's pointing them to Jesus, So basically, friends, those of you listening, I think if you can find a way to summarize the scripture, see that narrative arc and flow with these big movements throughout, that would be helpful for you in your own understanding of the Bible, but also in your testimony to other people of God's story. Because that's what the Bible is. It's God revealing to us who he is, what his activity has been in the world, how he feels about us, how he's working in us. Yeah.
Yeah, as I say, and that's one of the kind of incredible things to me about the scriptures too, is that it's not just this story that God is telling us about a bunch of stuff that happened way back some other time that we take, meaning out of.
Right.
But like we are actually a part of the story.
Right.
Like, so the story, it's still got this narrative arc and it's not done.
Yeah.
So we're waiting kind of for the completion of the story. The climax has happened. That'd be Christ on the cross, empty tomb. That's why we talk about that so much.
Right.
Because that's like the big plot point, that everything's pointing to. But there's still this, I guess, like the falling action. If you think of, I don't know if you ever had to chart narratives. Yeah, like in school, it was always like, setting and then like rising action, some more conflict and rising action, and the climax. But then that falling action before the resolution, and we're kind of in that falling action stage where everything has changed because of Christ's death and resurrection. But not just changed for us too. Like in our life. And so God He's also writing, like He's writing our stories too. And He's, the Acts talks about, or Paul in Acts talks about how God knew the boundaries that people were going to live, and the times that they were going to live. And, as followers of Jesus, we basically, we have this news of what He's done for the entire world, and He's positioning us to let that let the story live on, essentially. Find our space in it. Where have I been redeemed in my life? What are those salvation moments for me? And then be able to go and share that with other people so that they can be restored, be restored, which was God's goal the whole way through, to restore the creation. I love that this is, I'm probably using it out of context a bit, but Paul talks about the Gentiles being grafted in. I was actually looking for an image of a tree, because when I think of God's story, I kind of think of this like a tree, right? Okay. So there's this one big story that He's writing and telling. That's all. Jesus is that tree, right? He's like the trunk, and all the scriptures are telling this one very consistent, congruent story, But then Jesus, dies and rises again, and that's the main point, climax and everything. And then now, like, the branches are going out, with that story and reaching to all these different people. But Paul, talk about how the story was really limited to the Jewish people, right? Like, Egyptians weren't telling this story, or I don't know, other cultures back in the Israelites' day, except for those who came into interact with the Israelites and maybe even became a part of their community. But now in the New Testament in our day, like, this story has been opened up to the entire world. And so we kind of get to be these branches shooting off of this story, connecting ourselves to this story. It's almost like you could say Jesus is the vine and we're the branches. Exactly. And like, if we stay connected to Jesus, won't bear much fruit. Yeah. But if we cut ourselves off from Jesus, we can't do anything. Our stories will be pretty shallow, I think. I think Jesus maybe said that in John 15. Yeah. Did He say that? Yeah, something like that. He did. All right. John 15, Jesus said, I'm the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in Him will bear much fruit. Yeah. Right? And so that's, the lifeblood of Jesus, flows into us and through us and out into the world. Yeah. So His story is our story, and our story belongs to Him. And so I don't know, those of you listening, or Kevin, have you ever thought about, because you posed the question at the beginning of your sermon, what's your story? Yeah. Those of you listening, I would encourage you, if you've never done this activity before, to sit down and try to write your story in something that you could say in like 3 to 5 minutes, and not just your biographical information, but pointing to God's activity in your life, right? So in 3 to 5 minutes, could you tell your story and how the hand of God was upon you in pivotal moments of your life, and maybe how you came to faith and what that's meant to you? Could you do it in 3 to 5 minutes? If you've never thought about that, I would encourage you to actually grab a pen, pencil, or a typewriter, or a computer, whatever preference. When I was a kid, my dad had a typewriter. He brought it home from his office, and my brother and I would, Yeah. Oh man, those are the days. We also had rotary phones. I don't know anything about those.
You don't know rotary? You don't even know what one is?
I can picture it.
Oh,
it's got the little holes, right?
Yeah. So good stuff. So write it down though. Write down your story, because moments are going to come up, where you've got opportunity to share your story with people, and we should be ready. Be ready with that. So rehearse it, practice it, and because by telling your story of how God was active in your life, I think that's the best kind of testimony that we can give to the world. Mm-hmm. You're not gonna convince the world or change hearts and minds by dropping doctrinal truths, right, or trying to convince people to believe in Jesus. You're not going to convince people, but you're probably going to change hearts when you show them the reality of how God can and has been active in your life, and then you let the Spirit do the work. So,
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So there you go. That's your homework. All right. Kevin, as always, it's been good to sit with you here today and share stories and share about how impactful they are in our lives and getting to know God. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, man.